Y'all ready for this?
Welcome to the DeVerna podcast, where we talk about business, life, and how to win at both.
I'm really excited today to be talking to one of my favorite people on the planet, and that is Sensei Hurtsellers, who has a real name, but I just know him as Sensei, but Joe Hurtsellers. And so, Joe, if you want to maybe tell us a little bit about yourself for starters.
Well, sure. Well, I'm a lifetime martial artist, and I started when I was 14 years old, and was one of those kids in the 1970s that thought martial arts would be really cool. And back then, they didn't hardly take kids. I think I was probably the youngest one in the dojo, or pretty darn close to it, because we didn't even have a kids class back then. And got started. And once I started, I just loved being in the dojo. I like to say I was a dojo rat, and that's where I spent all my time. And as soon as school would be out during the school year, I would go to the dojo. We had a class that started at 6 o'clock, and I would get there about 3:30 and
Wow.
stretch. I had to get warmed up, so I would stretch. I was the only one there most of the time, except my karate teacher, which was Sensei Hanshi Bowles. And of course, he would be doing other things, and I'd be off in the training area. And then, as one thing led to another, I got a little bit older, and I had an opportunity to get my first job. And my first job was working for him. I like to tell people, one day the dojo roof started to leak, and he hired me as a teenager to go up and put tar on the roof. And I did that all summer long, but I knew that if I did a good job for him, there'd be other opportunities. And then eventually, right around the age of 16, he hired me to start teaching little intro lessons. And then I did that for a number of years. And then back in the 1980s, I want to say 88, I moved over to Toledo from Fort Wayne, which Fort Wayne was where I was from, and opened the dojo on Reynolds Road, and have been operating the dojo ever since. And I had run a dojo for him for a number of years on State Street in Fort Wayne before I came to Toledo. So I had a little bit of a background in at least the ability to teach and to communicate the mission of martial arts. So I was very blessed.
That's awesome. Fantastic. So martial arts has really been, I mean, not to say it's your whole life, but you've been doing it most of your whole life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I've loved it. I've loved every minute of it.
Yeah. What a fun thing. So I have practiced with you. I think I established it a couple years ago when we were getting ready for a test. And Kendall, who's one of your students and a friend of mine, was like, well, she said, how long have you been doing it? And I said, well, I think like whatever. She said, oh, wait, no, you started with my dad. So that means, and I was 13 or 12 or 11 or something. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So at that point, I think it was 13 years, which means that we're probably close to creeping up on 15 years of me practicing martial arts under your tutelage, if you will.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
It is really cool. I have one of the students. His name is his dad's name is Tommy, but his name is Colin, and I always call him Tommy because he looks just like his dad. So these are the kinds of things that happen. And then I said to Mark Sears the other night, I said, how long have you been doing this? About 13, 14, 15? He said, no. He says, Sensei, I've been here 20 years. So
right.
Time flies when you're having fun. But you know what is a true blessing is to have great relationships that have lasted over the years. And I'm probably the most blessed person on the planet to have these deep friendships and relationships and people that have helped the dojo grow and helped me grow. And it's just nice to have that kind of an environment.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, but it's so good for you in so many ways. I mean, the fun's many levels, like the freedom that it gives you, and the freedom to walk around comfortably and securely and confident and feel good about yourself. And the health aspects are tremendous, and the mental health with the meditation and all that stuff. It's such a blessing in so many different ways. I think, we had a talk 10 or so years ago, and before we started MAM, and it was like, why don't more people do martial arts? And, I think the thing is, it's really scary from the outside looking in. If you've never done it before, it can be scary. But once you get in, you realize it's the safest place on the planet, like with the best people. So it's really interesting, the perspective from the inside versus the outside. The outside folks oftentimes thinking we're a bunch of really tough people. Not that we're not. I mean, because we are, but the nicest of people.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. The other day I was thinking I just went through a surgery and I had some complications and some different things and little health issues, a little bump in the road, as I like to describe it. Fortunately, I'm on the other side of all that, and that's great. But when I was going through that, I kept thinking to myself, wow, I get it. That's how people feel that don't do martial arts all the time. Because I was really feeling feeble. I really felt like, if I walked into a room, could I take care of myself? And when people feel confident, it just makes them treat the world a little bit differently. Things that used to be a big deal become less of a big deal. You care more about the things that matter. Candidly, I like to tell people, some of the best martial artists I've ever been around in my life are always the ones that are the most likely to create peace in any given situation. They're the most likely to walk away from a situation because they have nothing left to prove.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a big deal. I think, when I think of the highest ranked people at our dojo, like the likelihood of any of us getting in a fight is like, it just is, I can't even imagine. Like what would have to be happening for any of those folks to get into a scuffle or anything. I just can't see that ever happening. So it's really interesting like that. So tell us a little bit about your background in martial arts, like as far as stylistically and some of that. And I know that's evolved. So I'd like to hear the process of kind of why that evolved and how.
Sure. So back in the days when I started in the 70s, and this is not unusual, you really didn't look at another style. It was really one style, one lifetime. That was the idea. And so it in a way that was good because it gave people a foundation. Because what you have happen today is it's kind of like the quitting culture that we have, and all of our kids have faced it. We've all seen it other places, that when the going gets tough, the person that's experiencing the toughness goes someplace else. Mm-hmm. And, like Sifu Brown likes to say, there's huge benefit in endurance. There's a huge benefit in going through that, because you're not just learning then something that's external. Because everybody that comes to the martial arts, and myself included when I started when I was a kid, but everybody is looking for that external, that outside thing. But the deepest benefits of martial arts are really realizing that it's going to pull something out from inside of you. And when we say that martial arts then becomes a way of life, there's a reason for that, because that thing that it pulled out of the inside of you is what you use in business. It's what you use in relationships. It helps you be a better parent. And so that people get kind of addicted, because you can get addicted to a lot of things that are external. Some of them are good for you. Some of them are really, really obviously bad for you. Mm-hmm. But when people get addicted to that internal strength that martial arts can produce, that's when they become lifers, like people like you and others. So, anyway, to be a direct answer to your question, so I started in a style called Shuri-Ryu. I did that for many, many years. I was introduced to the founder of karate in the United States, Robert A. Triaz, in Wikipedia. I became one of his students, traveled with him, of course, through the permission of my teacher, and was just honored to be on his fighting team, did a lot of different things, and spent time in that style. But I had one other influence that was kind of unique. There was a guy that kind of took me under his wing. He was probably the best kicker that ever came out of the Midwest, except for maybe Bill Wallace. They're kind of like two peas in a pod. But he was an athlete, and his name was Steve Perry. So not the lead singer from the band Journey, but. And Mr. Perry was so good to me. Like I said, took me under his wing. But what revolutionized my thinking was he had such athleticism that in the 1980s, the people that refereed the tournaments that he fought in did not have the visual acuity to track his movement. And I got to train with the guy, and I knew how good he was. And I would see things that he was hitting people with that referees were unable to see because they had never seen anything like it.
Wow.
It'd be like if you took a Michael Jordan and you put him back in the 1930s or 40s and had him play basketball, they just wouldn't understand what was even happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that really influenced me. And it made me think, there's got to be more than just doing things one way, because here's a guy that kind of on his own has figured out how to do things different way in this open circuit tournament. And so that made me a lot more flexible, I think. And of course, I wanted to imitate him. I wanted to be him, worse than anything as a kid. So I think that made it real possible for me to make a transition and then to pick up self-defense from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then make my transition into getting an opportunity to train with obviously with Professor Dunn with some Jiu-Jitsu, but then with Sifu Brown, who just kind of opened the whole logbook of what martial arts is. To Sifu Brown, if you grabbed a lamp cord and wrapped it around a guy's neck that's attacking you, that's good martial arts,
Yeah.
So it didn't matter the style anymore with him. It was all about freedom. And I think that was really helpful. But I will tell you this, if I didn't spend that 20 years before those exposures, maybe it wouldn't have been such a good thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty neat. I mean, the evolution of that, in the evolution of your martial arts, and, there's only a couple people that I really think martial arts looks really beautiful when they're doing, and you're one of those people. So there's just a couple people. There's a simple but elegant, and it's a lot of fun to watch people that are really, really gifted. And then the athletic element is also, that's a big positive for people. It's not one that I'm blessed with, but that's okay, because it really does take all kinds. We're all very different, and it's very accepting of whatever you have to offer,
Right.
And
right.
So I love the open architecture of being able to work, like one day we're doing some very karate based things, and then a little bit of Aikido is mixed in, and some jiu-jitsu is mixed in, and a little kung fu, and you just kind of throw it all in, kind of that Bruce Lee philosophy of just that whole story. So yeah, it's an awful lot of fun. Awful lot of fun. I could talk about martial arts all day, every day, and I really have every expectation, because I get a lot of questions about it. Like, people are constantly like, "Well, how are you staying in such good shape?" Well, I mean, you definitely know the story because you were there. But like, at one point, I was 240 pounds, and said if I got to 220, I'd start going to martial arts, because that would be like something I really knew I would get into and thought it would catch. And I'm a guy that's better when I have some accountability and those things. So, fast forward from those 10, 15 years, now I'm like 60 pounds lighter plus than what I was, before all that. And, have really never felt better. And I attribute a lot of that to you and to martial arts and to all that, and the mental, the mental elements with the meditation. So have you always been deep into the meditative side of this?
Well, yeah, it's funny you say that, because I always have. And in fact, the big part of one of the reasons I started was always kind of searching, which was kind of unusual for a 14-year-old, but it was something that was really real to me. And I think one of the things that affected me was the very first book I got on martial arts was a karate book. I actually got a small one. I think I was 13 years old. It was called Vital Karate by Masutatsu Oyama. And it was a small book, but a very nice little handbook. And then actually, I can't hold it up right now, but I got for a birthday from, I think my brother actually bought me this beautiful book called This is Karate by Masutatsu Oyama. It's no longer in print, so it's kind of hard to find. And then I found it on Amazon about a year ago. And I'm like, yes, there it is, because I lost it over the years, but it's just beautiful pictures. But Oyama has a nice section on Zen and meditation. And so that really appealed to me as a kid. And of course, in Hanchi Bull's dojo, in every single class, you meditate. It was always a thing in karate. I remember I was at an event one time, and one of the students asked the question, what was the deepest purpose of martial arts, right? And the teacher which was a brilliant teacher, incredible Kobudo, great martial artist, said the deepest purpose of martial arts is spiritual enlightenment. And I thought, oh man, spiritual enlightenment, that's so cool. But nobody ever actually explained to me what that was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because they didn't know. It was just that because people really, it was not something you talked about so much, because you can't, there's certain things that you feel on an emotional or visceral level. So then I started studying, and I got deep into the world of Alan Watts, and that was very complex, but it was very interesting for me. And then that led me to a couple of mentors. And, honestly, one of the people that really influenced me the most before I found Sifu was there was a gentleman by the name of John Kokinos, and his father was Nick Kokinos, the late, great Nick Kokinos. Now, Nick Kokinos worked directly with Jun Rhee to create some of the first really successful commercial dojos in the country. And so Nick Kokinos had a spiritual bend to him. He was a business guy, but he always talked about the spiritual side of things, that what you're seeing with your eyes is not necessarily what's really going on, because what you're seeing with your eyes is the manifestation of the thinking and the vibration that you've put out previously. That was Nick Kokinos. That was this business guy. And his son, John, just took it to the next level. Well, John became Professor Dunn's mentor and my mentor. And it was just an awkward time for me, because I went one direction in my life going through divorce, and Professor went another direction. And anybody that knows Professor is the most joyous, happy, powerful person you'll ever meet and ever be around. Truly one of the most successful people on the planet. I will tell you, when I first met him, he was not that guy. And he will tell you that a lot of that came from his exposure to the things that John was teaching. So then, long story short, that circle led me through Nick Kokinos to Sifu Brown. And what I just fell in love with, and of course, Professor Dunn had been doing this, but I'd gone distances and things were apart. When I got into Sifu Brown's dojo, I realized all of the things that Nick Kokinos were teaching were all buried in the martial arts. They were all there. Of course, they were in everything, but martial arts could be a tool to unlock some of those things. So then I started talking about those things, I think less in the last year or so than ever. But then I started teaching those things and sharing those things, but only to those that ask. Since most people don't ask, but I'll be happy to just teach them a triangle choke instead.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because like the meditation is, of all of the things that I learned through the process of practicing under you, that may be the most valuable. Like it's the one thing that no matter what I do every single day, and having a fairly stressful job, I mean, some days really, really easy, having the ability to kind of hit the reset button and knowing that I can meditate for a long time, and having meditated for so many years, I think there's something that happens. I can meditate for just like a couple minutes, and it can be very effective for me. It's kind of like almost like taking the Windex and spraying it on the table or something and just kind of cleaning it off. And then it's like, it doesn't take long to clean it. It's way cleaner, way faster than it used to be 10 years ago or whatever it was. And I actually, when I do some talks sometimes, I will actually try to get everybody in the group to meditate, because it's not as hard as what everybody, oh, I can never sit still. I can never, just, you don't have to do it for long. Like do it for like 30 seconds, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just like thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to go run a marathon today. Like nobody runs a marathon with just a couple days practice. Like it's a process. So I think that really is another part of it. That's a big deal.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to get people to understand, and make it real simple to understand. Everybody knows that, the way you believe, the way you think has a huge impact on the results that you get. And we've all experienced that many times. But what happens is the next question is, well, how do I control the way that the way I talk to myself and the beliefs that I have? And the answer is, you have to undo all the beliefs and all the negative beliefs first before you can build something positive. And was telling this story the other week, but there's a guy, and I'm going to screw up his name, so I apologize for that in advance. But it's funny because my wife, Senpai Shelley, is actually friends with his mom, but he's pretty famous. His name's John Durimbos. I think I'm saying that right. But he was a long snapper for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, my wife's sister is very close to John's mom. But he's famous because he's been on shows like America's Got Talent or Dancing with the Stars. Those shows, I don't really watch them, but I'm familiar with this because he's famous for being a professional football player that is also a professional magician. And so he's got a book out called Life is Magic. Excellent book. It's just incredible. And so one of the things that he talks about in there, I should just tell you this really quick little side story. So he got transferred from the Eagles to the Saints the year before the Eagles went on their Super Bowl run. And he'd been in the league like 16 years or something. That was his dream, was to always win a Super Bowl. But what happened to him was he did the physical for the Saints, and they discovered he had a heart condition. And he went into emergency surgery, and they saved his life that day. And he said, had I not got transferred, I wouldn't be alive today. And so that's, goes to his thing. And then after the Eagles got into the Super Bowl, the owner of the Eagles sent him a ticket and brought him into the sideline. And when they won the Super Bowl, they gave John a Super Bowl ring.
Wow.
So the great story, great
That's
read,
cool.
great, very inspirational. But my point is he says something in there that I love. He says his life changed the moment he decided to stop listening to himself and instead start talking to himself. That meditation allows you to understand when you're telling yourself things that you don't need and you shouldn't be saying, and it allows you to clarify when you're telling yourself the things that you should be hearing and should be doing. And if people don't know the difference between those two things, they're always going to struggle in life.
Yeah. That's interesting. I had a conversation with Mark Sears, who's one of your students also, senior students, probably the most senior, or one of for sure. And he was talking about your ability to, in your talks that you have at the end of class usually, like the ability to kind of hone in on something. And I have felt this too. If anybody's ever gone to church and they feel like the pastor is kind of preaching to them, like that's what you feel like sitting in the front row, or any row for that matter, in one of Sensei's talks. He's talking to this group, but somehow you're like, how did he know that I needed to hear that today? And it's one of the neatest things. I've never really, like, there are just very few people in the world that have the ability to kind of just put their finger or thumb on the pulse and know exactly what needs to be said, when it needs to be said, how it can be said so that it can be heard. And I think that's like, it's an absolute blessing to be in there and to be able to have that. And then, we've kind of, the dojo now has a lot more classes, and we've got evening classes, and we've got daytime classes and morning classes, and things are a little strange now anyways with all the COVID stuff. But so I haven't been as involved in the evening classes, which is your primary talking point. And I truly miss that. And I'm like, I need to really make a bigger effort. As a guy that wakes up before 5 in the morning, that 7 p.m. class may as well be midnight to me.
Right.
But it's interesting and fun. And it's cool that that I'm not the only one that feels that. Like we literally just talked about that on Saturday at class, Mark Sears and I. And so I thought that was a really interesting thing. And another thing that Mark and I were talking about was the difference between the physical act of martial arts and the mental, and we both know, because we've talked about it, but by the time this airs, I will have tested for my next rank. And these rank tests are no joke. Like, this isn't, no offense to other martial arts, but I mean, I've been practicing for, as long as I have, approaching 15 years, and I'm not a black belt. And people look at you like, what do you mean? How are you not a black? My 7-year-old's a black belt. How are you not a black belt? And I'm like, well, every discipline has its own systems. And I really appreciate the one that we have in the culture. And we were talking about that testing process and how much of that is physical and the preparation that's needed, and how much of that is mental and the preparation that's needed, and the discipline that is required to be able to do some of the things that you have to do through that process of that long career of martial arts. And then the ability to, as we get older, to kind of feel how those things fit together, and also be able to practice. I mean, we have a guy in our dojo, I believe he's 73 years old. It's Mr. Church. Yep. And you do not want to mess with this guy. Like this is not a guy. To say it's not a typical 73-year-old is an extreme understatement. Yeah. I'm not wrong. Like it is, I'm way undershooting. Like this guy will, if you messed with him, and I can't imagine why you would, but like it's pretty cool to have people at all ages and such different levels. Like as the teacher, as the instructor, that it must just be a joy to watch some of that stuff, huh?
It is, and there's also a couple things going on. Of course, it's a joy to watch, but it's also, you feel like, well, I really truly feel like I won the lottery with people like you, people like Gary, people like Mark, and many of the other people that have come over the years. I really can't take much credit for that. These were marvelous people. I was talking to Gary the other night. I was stepping out because I usually leave a little early on Tuesdays. I was looking at the class, and I'm looking at him from behind. I'm like, I'll be darned if he isn't putting on more muscle mass, And he said, matter of fact, I am. And then he flexed his bicep. And so, he's kind of proven some things wrong about the way that we imagine that our bodies will deteriorate over time. I don't think that's the case with Gary. I think his body is exactly where he wants it to be. And he's done that based on his decision rather than the things that other people tell him are true.
Yeah. So we didn't talk about this before, but we should now. So you're an author, and you've written a couple books. First of all, what inspired you to write a book? I mean, that's something that a lot of people think about and not a lot of people do.
Yeah. I read something a long time ago, and I found it to be true. And people have asked me recently, actually, that when's the third book coming? And I said, well, I know it's going to come, but I don't know. You'll find out when I know, Or they'll ask great authors like Stephen King, how's your book going to end? And he says, I don't know, but we'll get there. Mm-hmm. I've always believed that if I get my mindset right, the book kind of writes itself. And the act of writing is a process. And when I say a process, it's a process I use to tune my vibration. So I tune my vibration through meditation, and then I have some other processes that I share sometimes on the mats when people ask. But then writing for me creates a focus of my mind. And, just like I was talking about before, how we talk to ourselves is really valuable. So when I'm writing, it slows my thought down enough that when it hits the paper right, I can feel it. And when it hits the paper wrong, I can feel that too. And if I sit there for 30 or 40 minutes writing, my consciousness raises. And so at the end of, I will tell you, both of my books were like this, but particularly my second one, I wrote for over a year just on a pretty much a daily basis. I would just write. And then this, I thought to myself, well, I really don't have anything because it was not my intention to write a book. But I kept it all in one folder in Google Docs, and I was like, well, damn. And I just kind of put it together, and I literally did not even hardly change the order of what I wrote. Matt Kazawa came in and it cleaned up my misspellings and edited, and this is confusing, put it this way. But other than that second book was pretty much no intention of writing a book, just writing for my own edification. And then that book came out, and I think it turned out pretty good.
Great. Awesome. So I touched on something for a second, and I want to make sure that we hit on it. So we started with your help and with the help of Mark Sears and Sue Jackson and many others throughout. We started this little non-for-profit with the idea conceptually that we'd be able to kind of give back to martial arts. And so we've done now at this point thousands of scholarships for primarily kids, but also some adults that otherwise couldn't do martial arts. And so do you want to speak to that, like that little organization? And we're starting to make some progress, some inroads to some much bigger platforms. We've got some high level competitors in some pretty large organizations that are starting to get, we're getting some experience with through the UFC and through some jiu-jitsu things and some of this. And it's a lot of fun that I'm a part of it. And I only have the responsibility of talking about it. I don't really have to do any of the heavy lifting, which makes it like pretty much perfect for me. But what would you say about that organization? Because I think this is a good launching point for us to be able to start to tell more people, because not a lot of people know it exists.
Yeah, no. Well, the biggest thing is I mean, I think all education is like this, but other forms of education already have in place ways that there's, student loans and student financing or grants that are given, especially to students that really are good students that would like to get the education that they need. Now you imagine a regular education, which is of course fantastic, but you imagine, what we're trying to do for people on an internal level and what we're trying to do for people's health. So really, as a martial arts teacher, it puts us in the realm of two worlds, right? One foot is in the world of martial arts, and this is self-development, and this is really a path to making life better for human beings. And then the other foot is there's rent, there's utilities, there's insurance, there's payroll, there's all these other things. And somehow we have to find the balance for that. And so traditionally, a lot of martial arts school owners, myself included, you see somebody that needs it, they need it. They just simply need it. But then at some point, the bills aren't getting paid, and then that kind of can catch up. So what MAM does for us is it fills that gap. So it allows us to teach martial arts the way we want to teach martial arts in a professional, clean, deeply moral and ethical way, and at the same time take the money part a little bit more off the table so that people that really want to train have that opportunity. And I just think it's a marvelous thing, because there's literally been dozens and dozens and dozens of lives that have been changed and shifted because of this. And kudos to you, by the way, for you being the brainchild of it and getting the ball rolling with it and promoting it so well. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's the least that I could do. And really what's funny is that I don't really have to do very much. We have such amazing people that have stepped in and taken the reins. And now I'm kind of like one of the spokesmen for it, and we've been down in Matt Brown's gym, the immortal Matt Brown with the UFC. Most UFC fans would definitely recognize that name. And I was there having a conversation with him about it. And, we're talking about the kid program and all that. And then I'm leaving after I was in his office with him, and we're leaving, and he has a special needs program going. And I'm like, Matt, why didn't you tell us about that? And he says, well, you didn't ask about that. You told me about the kids. And I'm like, but, and so it's just neat, just like exactly what you said, the gym or dojo owners are doing this stuff anyways. And so for us to have the capacity and now have a vehicle, a 501c3 that's officially been running for approaching 10 years and given out thousands of scholarships and tens of thousands of dollars, and nobody even knows about it yet. And so we're getting the word out so that the Matt Browns of the world, and hopefully at some point the Dana Whites of the world, and who knows where it goes from there. But the true martial arts, like the martial arts people they're very giving folks. And some of us are so blessed. I mean, I'm spoiled. I'm not just blessed, I'm spoiled. And so to be able to give back and be able to have other people have the same kind of experiences that I've had, I mean, I wish nothing but this is definitely one of my driving forces for where I want and feel like I can improve and get better at, like not just on the mats, but off the mats, bringing more people to it. It's a pretty awesome organization. I'm super proud to be involved with it, and it's just great.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you had told me a long time ago, but it's absolutely true that happens, is you might even have people that have started and they're really enjoying the practice, and then something happens, a divorce happens or an illness happens. And this is this thing that allows people to continue their practice. And, like I said, most of them know that they can continue their practice anyway, But the truth of the matter is most of them would never impose that way. So what it does is it just really fills a very special need and a very important gap, I think, for people.
Yeah. Well, and we've seen with the COVID situation, there's no question that the gyms are one of the places that are suffering immensely. There's no question that whether it's a gym or a dojo or whatever, stylistically, it doesn't matter. Like, everybody's in this together. And there's just no way, with all of the people that ultimately probably end up dropping off or hitting pause or whatever with their, like, to be able, the rent's still due. You still have to keep it a certain temperature. You still have, there's a lot of things. And oftentimes the expenses have spiked because you have more cleaning to do. You have more help that you need. You have the responsibility. Now you're trying to do things online, virtually, and there's new technology involved. And so there's all these things. As a business owner, I can relate to your situation in that. And so it's not like, well, that's an easy thing. So to have something where it's not just the gym owner skipping lunch so that he can have Billy practice martial arts tonight, like, that's definitely not what we want. We want everybody to come out of this better and stronger than they came into this COVID situation. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to get the word out on that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So if somebody wanted to find you and find our dojo, like, what are the best ways to get introduced, and what would we give them for, hey, like, come check us out?
Yeah. Well, the easiest thing is to go to our website. There's information about my background. You can find links to my books, really a lot of information about what we do as a dojo. And that's in particularly important. And that's at ohiomartialarts.com. And if you just go there, then you'll see all the information. It's all readily available for anybody. And there's some free stuff on there too that's, I think, very positive. There's also a link to my podcast. I've got that out there as well. So if you're interested in the internal stuff, then you can hear that as well.
Yeah, that stuff's great. Is there anything else that we should be talking about before I let you go? Because I see we're bumping up on our time here.
No, I don't think so. I think I've really enjoyed it. It's always a pleasure. It's kind of fun, and I'm really looking forward to Saturday morning.
Yeah, should be fun. Well, if nothing else, it's always interesting and it's always very challenging. So we're looking forward to it. So thank you, sir. Always.
All right.
Have a blessed rest of your day.
It's an honor. Thank you.
DeVerna offers products and services using the following business names: Creative Financial Partners, Insurance and Financial Services, Emeritus Investment Company, LLC, AIC, member FINRA, SIPC, Security Investments, Emeritus Advisory Services, AAS, Investment Advisory Services, AIC and AAS are not affiliated with Creative Financial Partners. Products and services are limited to residents of states where the representative is registered. This is not an offer of securities in any jurisdiction, nor is it specifically directed to a resident of any jurisdiction. As with any security request and prospectus from a representative, read carefully before you invest or send money. A representative will contact you to provide requested information. Representatives of AIC and AAS do not provide legal or tax advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney regarding the situation.
Thanks for watching.